All right, hello. So in this video, I'm going to be the interviewer. My name is Anthony Petraki, and we have with us Lena Bachon.
Hi.
All right, Lena's my godmother. She's my aunt. So tell me, from where are you from?
I was born in Damascus, Syria, and I grew up in Montreal, Canada, and now I live in California.
Okay, so from what age? At what age did you move from Syria?
I was 9 years old when we moved from Syria to Canada, to Montreal.
Do you remember anything from Syria?
Yes, I do. I remember my friends, I remember my family. I had a big family, a lot of cousins, a lot of school friends. We had to leave school. I remember when I had to tell my friends in school that we're moving, and my friends were asking me when you're coming back, and I said, no, we're not coming back, we're just gonna move permanently. So yeah, I remember a lot.
And tell me, how did you feel when you left?
Well, so I was 9. I was sad because I was leaving my friends and my grandmother and my family and my cousins, but at the same time I was excited because I was going to a new country. I didn't know, I heard so much about it and I didn't know how it was going to be. So I was excited. I was, wanted to go there and see what else was there. I heard about, having big parks and big amusement parks. And for me as a kid, we didn't have that in Syria, so I was really excited too.
Great. And what type of culture shock did you experience in Canada?
So when we first moved to Canada, I didn't speak the language. So first of all, I didn't speak the language.
Did you say what the language is about?
I'm sorry?
Could you tell them what the language is?
So we moved to Montreal, so the first language is French. And when I grew up in Syria and Damascus, and there the language is Arabic. So at the time I only spoke Arabic. I could read and write in French, but I didn't speak the language, so that was the most difficult thing for me. First, learn the language. And then culture shock, yes, everything was different. Holidays and people were different, the way they interacted. And also going to Montreal, it was a very multicultural city, so there was a lot of different cultures, ethnicities, not just French Canadians, but also Greeks and Italians and Portuguese and Lebanese. So it was like a mix of people. And the way the French Canadians lived, family-wise and friends-wise, it was very, very different to what I was accustomed to, and very different to how my parents raised me.
So, because there was a lot of different cultures in Montreal, did it make you feel like you weren't at home in any way?
Not really. I mean, sometimes, so the French-Canadian culture is extremely different than the Middle Eastern culture. But it made me more comfortable when I met other people that were Middle Eastern. They weren't Syrian, but they were Lebanese. So it was close. So then it made me a lot more comfortable, like that person's gonna understand better, why my parents are not gonna let me go to that party. And then sometimes Italians or Greek, they had a lot of similarities, more similarities to the Middle Eastern culture than the French Canadian culture. So it felt like I wanted to make those kind of friends first because they would understand me better.
So you stuck to people that you could relate to, basically.
Yes.
All right. So I want to go back to you talked about language and how it was hard for you to learn the language in Canada. Could you tell me if it was only related to like education, like school-wise, or was it also there was a barrier with friends and people around you from the community?
Oh, everything. Because I didn't speak French at all. So everybody was interacting in French, everybody was speaking in French. So first of all, education-wise, I had to get up to speed quickly. So I went to a school, the first year we were in Montreal, just to learn French. And then making friends. How can you make friends if you don't even speak the language? So it was very, very, very difficult. The first year was horrible. I still remember it. I was very stressed out. I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to fail in school. I'm never going to make friends. This is a disaster. So it was really difficult.
And you were, 9-year-old. So
yes.
So how about when did you move to California then?
I moved to California in 2008, not very long ago, and I moved to California for work. I had a job opportunity and that I wanted to take. At the time, I was working in Canada, but I wasn't finding the right job for me. I had just completed my MBA and a CFA, and I wanted something more in line with my education. So I wasn't able to find the right job for me in Montreal, so I broadened my search, started looking everywhere, and then an opportunity came up in San Francisco, so I decided to take it and move here.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how you experienced culture shock going from Syria to Canada at a young age, but how old were you when you moved from Canada to San Francisco?
I was 28.
28. So did you experience any type of culture shock, maybe discrimination or anything related to from where you come from in San Francisco?
I think to a much lesser extent than Canada, than Montreal. First, I came to San Francisco, already I spoke the language. So English is my third language, but at least I spoke the language. And there was still some culture shocks. It's still, yes, Canada versus US, they're very, very similar in a lot of ways, but it's still two different countries and they have their own culture. It's not, people might think, oh no, Canada and US is the same. It's not the same.
So you moved to San Francisco. It's obviously not the same. And what did you notice about the population here compared to, as in the general population, as compared to Montreal?
I think people here are friendlier. I really find people here are friendlier. It's also a multicultural city. In San Francisco, we have people from all over the world too, and I like that. I like the mix. I find people here friendlier. I find people here less. I want to say racist, but less biased than Montreal. There's still like other culture shocks. I mean, like for example, like a simple example, like Thanksgiving. In Canada, we celebrated Thanksgiving in a completely different month than, we celebrated Thanksgiving in October, and here in the US, Thanksgiving is celebrated in November. Mm-hmm. So that was like something that I didn't realize until I actually moved here. I'm like, oh really? Wow, Thanksgiving is supposed to be in October, and Americans are like, no, Thanksgiving is in November. So that's like one of the things that was different that I didn't know about until after I moved here.
So you would say it's more of an adaptation to a specific, small details about a country more than
yes.
an actual culture shock related to language or
yes,
race.
Right. So I wouldn't say it was like a big culture shock. I don't think that it was a big culture shock. Maybe because, first of all, I'm an adult, and second, there's not a lot of big differences between Canada and the US, but it's just getting accustomed to, driving here, for example, compared to Canada. It's completely different. The weather here, it's much different than, driving in the snow, driving over ice in Canada and Montreal. So here, the highways, the freeways are way wider. It's, the temperature, the weather, it's different.
Okay, so I would say you've lived a fair amount of time in either countries, whether it's Syria or Canada or US. You lived multiple years in every one of them. Mm-hmm. Would you say that you would have, from experience, you would have more hard time going from Syria to Canada, or would it be easier going from Syria to US?
I think. And I don't know so maybe I'm wrong, but I'm thinking it would have been easier to go from Syria to the US, because when I went from Syria to Canada, I had to learn French as a primary language, but I also had to learn English in school. So then I had to learn two languages. And the French Canadian culture is very different compared to the American culture, where I think American culture is probably, closer. Well, it's very different, but it's closer than the French Canadian culture to the Middle Eastern one. I think probably moving to the US would have been easier. Also, English is an easier language to learn than French. But who knows? I mean, I was very young, so maybe being younger was just harder on me than moving if I was older, if I was an adult.
Okay, so what about something other than languages? Maybe something related to education, or going directly from school to a job, or getting along with friends, or with maybe teachers, maybe just random people from the community. What would you say would be the biggest difference between Canada and the US from a perspective of a young girl coming from Syria?
Other than languages, there's a lot of differences. For example, my parents were very, very conservative. So when I was growing up, I was a teenager, I wanted to go out with my friends, I wanted to go out to, restaurants, bars when I became an adult. And my parents grew up in a very conservative, culture where it wasn't acceptable to be going out at night and coming back very, very, very late at night home, being a young woman. It was more acceptable for men to do that, but not for women to do that. So my brother used to go out, no problem, but when I wanted to go out with my friends, it was like, okay, what time are you coming back? You better be here by 10 o'clock. And I'm like, no, my friends are all going. We're going to be back at midnight maybe, or, long later. And it was just not acceptable. So this is like one of the things where almost like I have to explain to my friends why my parents were very strict, and my Canadian friends, their parents were way looser. They were like, well, I'm an adult now, I can do whatever I want. How come you're an adult and you still have to, kind of take permission? But that's how I grew up. I grew up in a family where it was they were conservative. It was kind of strict upbringing. I respected my parents a lot, and we had to do whatever they said. So there was a lot of negotiation, obviously a lot of back and forth, a lot of like, no, come on, I want to do this, I want to go out, I want to, So it took effort to get to where I wanted to get. It took a lot of effort, a lot of negotiation, a lot of, please let me do this. And whereas my friends were like, okay, bye, I'm leaving. And then another thing, when my friends became adult, like 18 years old, considered adult in Canada, whereas in the US, you have to be 21 to be considered an adult, but in Canada, it's 18. So one of the things that at 18 years old, a lot of my friends moved out of their home and went into an apartment and moved by themselves. So I wanted to do the same. And guess what? My parents were like, you're not going anywhere. And not until you get married, you're not going anywhere. And it was like, it sucked. Because I'm like, well, my friend Bonnie did, and my friend Sarah did, and I want to do it too. They were like, nope, you're not doing it. No, you're not doing it. I don't care. You're 18, you're still a kid. So you're not going anywhere at 18. So that was one of the things where, my friends were doing stuff. I couldn't do it. This is one of the, just the social aspect, the going out,
So that would be more of a difference between Syrian culture and Western countries.
That's right.
Where it is pretty similar in Canada and the US, but I still understand what you're saying. That's all right. I want to go to a different topic, which is school education and work. Did you go to school in Syria?
I did. I went to grade 4th.
4th grade. That's the American system, right?
Elementary. Okay. Yes.
Okay. So do you remember a little bit about the school system and how it was compared to the US or Canada?
Yes.
Maybe? And could you explain a little bit on it?
So the class was, so I went to Catholic schools, and so, you know, grew up in a Catholic community, and my parents really wanted us to go to Catholic schools because religion was very important for my family. So the school system was run by nuns, and they were extremely tough in Syria. So first of all, class size was like, we were like almost 60 students in the class, whereas in Canada we're like 30 at the most. And so classes were much bigger in Syria, and then it was way, way more strict. Like, for example, if a teacher asked you a question and you didn't know, you were in trouble. So she would make you go in front. Basically, it was embarrassing. She would make you go in front of the classroom and face the wall and stand there for like 20 minutes. And then if someone really, 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 really misbehaved, they would ask the student to come to the front and do this with their arms, with their hands, and they would take a ruler and like slap them on the arms here, like 1, 2, 1, 2, and you know, it's not like it didn't hurt a lot, but it didn't matter. It was like very embarrassing for a student to go in front and get basically slapped on the hands. So my parents didn't like that at all. They had a problem. They didn't want anyone touching their kids. And a lot of parents felt the same way, but complaining or whatever didn't get them anywhere. And it was just much stricter. You must have, you know, you must do your homework. You must be calm in class. If you misbehaved, you were going to go stand by the wall somewhere, or they're going to slap you on the hand. So it was embarrassing. I didn't like it at all. I thought it was too strict. They would give you a lot of homeworks and you better do it. And it was a lot of homework. It was a lot, the workload was way more than in Montreal. So when I moved to Canada and I went to school, so first year I spent learning the language. And then after the first year, so I lost a year. So I did 4th grade, did that language class. And then instead of going to 5th grade, actually I went to 6th grade, because even though I lost a year technically, I did tests and exams, and I was like easily level 6. Why? Grade 6. Because the mathematics, for example, in Syria was way more advanced for a 9-year-old compared to a 9-year-old in Canada. Math and science, like anything science, anything math, was way more advanced. So I continued my education and went straight to 6th grade, but my grades were like, I was like, wow, that's easy. I learned this like a year ago and that's so easy. So especially math, like I was just acing it. I was acing everything. It was just, education is extremely important in my family. My parents always wanted us to get the best education. And I really find that in Canada it was way easier than in Syria.
Okay, so from what I can understand from your story is that for your family, education was very important, right? Okay. Where you came from Syria, did it impact in any way your relationship with teachers or with superiors in school?
Well,
or even we can ask the same question you can give us some examples for maybe about the work, whether it's in Montreal or in San Francisco.
So in Syria, when I went to school, it was very formal in the sense that you could not easily speak to teachers or ask questions. It was like you almost had to have a really good question to go ask a question. It was a lot more structured. Well, I don't know if structured is the right word, but people were not welcome to go and ask questions so freely. So in Canada, yes, I had a little bit of a culture shock, because in class, people were encouraged to raise their hands and ask questions. They were encouraged to do that all the time. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I had a teacher who said, look, if you don't understand something, and I know French is not your first language, come after class to my office and ask me questions and I'll help you out. So that was a culture shock for me. Like, oh really? Wow, I could go see you later, and you can help me and you can answer my questions. That was great. So that was something that I didn't expect.
Great. So you didn't feel any discrimination. It was very helpful from the teachers, right? A lot of help.
From teachers, yes, it was helpful. I think when I went to when I was a teenager, when I was in high school in Canada, I had a couple teachers that I felt discrimination against. Not just me, but other students that had different backgrounds, different ethnicities, also felt the same way, where the teacher would handpick French Canadians and give them the cool projects or the easy stuff. Or then you would easily see grades, even though a team of 2 did it, and it's, one French Canadian and one non-French Canadian, you would see the French Canadian getting a way better grade, even though they did it as a team, so it's supposed to be the same grade for both. So I saw some discrimination in high school, definitely.
Okay. What about your job in San Francisco? Did you feel any discrimination from
No.
the employment center here?
No, I didn't. People I work with are great. I didn't feel any discrimination. Sometimes, a lot of times people won't even ask, but sometimes when they do ask, I tell them, yeah, I was born in Syria and I grew up in Canada, and they're like, Syria? Isn't that where the war is right now? And they look at me weird, like they're wondering if I'm Muslim, they're wondering if I'm Christian, they're wondering if I lived in a tent, and I'm like, no, Syria is it's not what you see on TV. It's, it's Damascus where I grew up. It was a great city. It was the capital and it was beautiful, and it's not what you see. It's not like those torn cities that you see on the TV, and sometimes, yeah, like when I first came to San Francisco, I had a different job than what I have now, and a guy that I work with said to me, oh yeah, you must have paid so much money on clothes when you moved to San Francisco. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, in Syria, don't you wear all black, like this whole thing black? And I looked at him like, no. Hey, I'm Catholic. We don't wear stuff like that. And besides, even Muslim people, they don't. Some of them do, sure, but not all of them. Some of them wear the hijab, but not all of them. And by the way, I'm not even Muslim. I'm Catholic. So certainly Christians didn't wear that. So, and the guy was like, oh, okay. And he was just, had no idea. So sometimes I get weird questions like that, but I didn't feel much discrimination here.
It's more curiosity than anything.
Yeah, curiosity.
All right, great. Moving to the last topic I want to talk about is we all have our own definition of American dream, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you do too. Mm-hmm. Could you explain what was your definition of American dream in a couple sentences? Maybe was it from like in the perspective of either a young girl from Syria or a young girl from Canada?
So as a young girl from Canada, American dream was to live freely in terms of no debt, having a lot of money, and being free to do whatever I want whenever I wanted it. I felt like Canada was more of a socialist country where there's a lot of caps on how much money you can make, on how much you can do, and the opportunities were just not there. You wouldn't hear of a lot of people who are billionaires there. You don't hear of a lot of people who are, sure, of course there are, but not to the same extent that the US. US, you have a lot more billionaires here. Not millionaires, billionaires. You have a lot more innovators, you have a lot more opportunities. You see a lot of millionaires too. You see average people that go out there, create something or work hard at something, and then all of a sudden they make it and they make it big. Whereas you didn't hear much of that in Canada. You didn't see much of it. I wanted to move away for that American dream because, Canadians are, in my opinion, overly taxed. There's a lot of taxation, there's not a lot of employment opportunity, and there's not a lot of programs or encouragement from the government for people to go and create jobs or create companies or innovate. So yes, the American dream, in short, for me, was to be able to come to the U.S. and be able to work hard and make a lot of money and be free of debt, because I had a lot of student debts back then because of school. But that was really what I wanted.
Great. All right. And to end the interview, do you want to talk to us about whether or not you have achieved this American dream in any way, in any possible way that you might think about?
Well, in a way, yes, and in a way, no, because although I am debt-free, I consider myself debt-free. I got a much better job when I first moved here than what I had in Canada, and then later I quit that job and I got a different job which was even better. And so in a way, yes, I achieved my dream of coming to the US and being able to go up the ladder, get promoted, go up the ladder, find new opportunities, find new jobs. So in a way, yes, I did achieve it, but from a personal goal perspective, I feel like I still have a lot more to do.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you for letting me interview you. That was great. And
all right. Well, thank you very much, Tony.
all right.